be optimum.
Yeah. I'm pretty geeked out to have you on here. I have like a backyard ultra royalty on. I was just kind of like looked up some of your accomplishments, right? Sugarloaf Marathon, you got a first in 2002, 2013 sets fat ass 50K. Last Man Standing 2016 first, 2019 first, 2020 first, 2022 Anchor Down first, and then probably the most impressive is your ninth place twice at Bigs. When looking back on kind of what you've accomplished, I mean, how does that make you? What does that? When just me saying that, what does that make you think?
Yeah, I mean, you dug way back there, back to 2002. I actually remember I grew up in southern Maine, really close to the New Hampshire border. We actually could walk there from our house, and it was a really strong running scene in high school, in college, and even afterwards. And I remember winning my first 5K race down in New Hampshire, and I think there was a reporter there, and he asked me about it, and I said, "Well, I'm just lucky that this person didn't show up, this person didn't show up, this person didn't show up." So I was not used to winning at all, and then coming to Maine, deeper into Maine, I started winning more races, and then as the races got longer, I started doing better too. Left those 5Ks behind and went for something longer. So no, it's pretty cool to hear that. I don't ever see that list all in one spot.
I mean, I remember. So this last Man Standing, I remember there was a point where JT where they Will announced that this is the top 10, and I was just blown away. Like I've never, like I don't think of myself as being a skilled runner in any way, shape, or form. And it's like I just got top 10 in something that blows my mind. Let alone the first that you pulled off in some very remarkable events. I do want to ask you before we get into everything. I was just watching the video of your finish at Bigs this last year, and I want to know. So you're coming to the line, and it's like 30 seconds or so until the hour's up, and you look a little wobbly, and then you decide to tap out. What was going on in your head right at that moment? Like, yeah.
I actually got to see that video. Somebody shared that with me. And from my perspective, I thought I was sprinting the finish.
Well, you did. I mean, I did see a little clip of you coming in pretty quick at the end.
Yeah, it didn't look very fast to me. It felt a lot faster than that. Because I could hear the whistles. I think I heard the 2-minute whistle, and then I heard the 1 minute until the next hour whistle, and so I was huffing it, trying to get that one more point for Team USA there. And I had mentally quit long before, but I just wanted to get that last point, and it was just a bit of relief. You probably saw in the video that people were trying to encourage me to keep going. 2 of the guys on my team were offering me water, offering me food, because you can't get any aid after the start unless it's by another runner. So they were offering me, and I turned them down. I had decided already. It wasn't a spur of the moment decision at all. Yeah, it's a slow, steady spiral. I ran 2 more loops than I thought I would, to be honest. I thought I was done, and then my wife was pushing me out for another one. My heart rate was at 193 at this point, like constantly. So I'm kind of freaking out about that a little bit. And yeah, I was just tired. I was done. Mostly mentally. I think physically I probably was still okay, but the brain just plays these games with you, and it's hard to beat your brain.
Absolutely, and that's kind of the endeavor we've taken on, right? Trying to push our brain to let our body do what it can do.
Yeah.
So then you have an embrace with your wife, I assume, and
Yes.
and you're done. Like, I mean, it's a weird race though, this backyard ultra, because you're deciding to quit. You know, you're quitting, but I'm guessing there's some satisfaction for just going as far as you did. Like you said, just doing 2 more laps than you even thought possible. I mean, what's and how emotional this whole thing, like, were you down on yourself? Like, I don't know what.
Um, if we had had this conversation in October, I would have sounded very, very disappointed in myself. And it wasn't my personal record. I felt like I could get my personal record there, and it didn't work out. And I mean, I loop away from my personal record myself to keep going 3 more loops. But it just, yeah, it felt disappointed. I've talked to some other runners on my team that kind of felt the same way, and they got personal records, and they're still like, oh my gosh, I only ran 1 more loop than my personal record. Because we're all dreaming of 100 hours. Honestly, like that was probably pretty much everyone's goal. Like, because we don't know, none of us know if we can do it, if it's possible. Nobody had ever done it before, and I don't know. I was crazy enough to shoot for the 100, and because I've made every other goal that I've set in the backyard, and I said, okay, let's make a crazy goal and see where that brings me.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So a lot of people feel disappointed, but I think as time goes by, it gets in better perspective. It is pretty cool. I mean, to have gone over 200 miles is an accomplishment on any weekend.
Going over 100. I mean,
Yeah,
going over
yeah.
26 is an accomplishment, to be honest with you.
Right.
So I was going to ask you how you got into all this. I mean, I know I read a little bit just today, kind of looking up that you were a runner in high school, and then tried out in college, and then you got into some marathons, and did quite well in their marathons.
Yeah.
Talk me through kind of how your progression. I mean, was it how did you even get into running? Was it something your parents instilled into you, or just the sport that, like, how that all happened? And then how do you get from that to ultra marathons?
That's a long story right there.
Take your time.
There was never a time in my life where I didn't run. I mean, as soon as I was walking, I was running. And but as far as running for running's sake, not chasing a ball around, that happened for me in 7th grade. And I honestly forget why I did it, but I think it was probably soccer is my passion. Like that's my sport. I love it. I've loved it forever. And I think that I probably picked up track and fields just to get in shape a little bit for soccer, keep the legs moving, and I really enjoyed it. So um, yeah, I became kind of a lifelong runner. In high school, I got a little bit more serious, especially towards the end of high school. I would actually practice a month ahead of time instead of just jumping into it. Um, and then I tried out for the soccer team at the University of New Hampshire. Nobody who walked on made the team. Actually, several of the recruits were even cut, and so that was humbling. But I had a plan in my background. I was going to run track if I didn't make the soccer team. I had spoken to the coach, Jim Belanger, and he had given me a training plan. And he said, okay, you need to be running 40 miles a week over the summer. And I had, up to that point, I think I might have broken 20 once or twice. I thought he was nuts to go 40 miles in a week. So I did the same route from my house in Berwick, Maine, 5 times a week, 8 miles. It was dead flat. I didn't realize that at the time, but since I've moved, I realized how flat it was down there. And then I joined the team. I was pretty much exclusively a half miler, 800 meter. Wasn't that great at it. I tried to break 2 minutes. I never did succeed. I think I did 2 minutes, 0.8 seconds, something like that. And I was spending 24 hours a week, lifting, running, being ready for track and field. And I wanted to do other stuff when I was in college. I was really into environmentalism, sustainability. So I actually quit the team and joined the sustainability office at school as a paid position. And I kind of gave up running for a little bit. I went down to like 2 mile days after that for maybe a month. And then I don't know how the marathon thing happened, but I decided to do a marathon in Keene, New Hampshire, and it turned out I was a whole lot better at marathoning than I was at doing the half mile. As far as position goes, I think I finished 10th my first marathon. I was trying to qualify for Boston in my first marathon. Wrote all my times on my arm that I had to hit to qualify for Boston. And when I was 8 miles in, I was so far ahead of qualifying that I could just relax and just run. Because when you do something for the first time, you have no idea what you. And I think I ran a 2:53:17 on that, and I was super happy about it. So I just kept doing marathons after that, 1 or 2 per year. And then I stopped for a while. I decided to retire from marathoning. Then my wife got pregnant, and I decided I want to do it one more time before I had kids. So I went to Sugarloaf a second time in 2011 and ran the exact same time that I did in 2000. Was it 2003? You said, I think it was, that I ran that first one. So anyway, I ran the exact same time. Didn't win. I finished third this time. And anyway, I caught the bug again. So I decided to keep being a runner even after my daughter was born. Ran a little while, then decided to stop again. And then, actually, is that true? No, at this point, I'm not stopping anymore. Doing marathons for a little while. I went up to PEI to run a marathon with a friend, John Villeneuve. And he's kind of a dreamer type of guy. And he says, "Oh, how about we do an ultra next year after this race?" And I'm like, "All right." He thinks it was my idea. I'm pretty sure it was his idea. So we both signed up for the Pineland Trail Festival 50 miler. We went for the highest one that they had there. And we both had a great time. I think I finished a little under 7 hours. He finished really close to the cutoff, I think 12 and a half hours for him. And then from there, I just decided I was going to try to do every Pineland Trail Festival race in consecutive years. So I did the 50 miler, then the 50K, then the 25K. I ended up doing the Canicross 5K. I borrowed someone's dog and ran that. I have not run all of the races there yet, but I've run most of them at this point. So, and then the whole last man standing thing, I don't think it came on Facebook. Maybe that somehow got to me on Facebook back in 2016. Sounded like the dumbest thing in the world when I first saw it.
I had exactly the same thought when somebody, like, I think somebody at work mentioned there's these crazy people just running till, like, I've done lots of like little loops, like a 3-mile loop, running around my neighborhood. It's like I get so sick of it. It's like you're gonna do 4 miles over and over. Like, how miserable that must be. I had the same thought.
Yeah, and I did too. And honestly, so I'm a middle school teacher, and the job that I ended up getting was teach 5th through 8th grade, so 4 years of kids for math and social studies and language arts. And I'm like, that sounds crazy. Like, I want to be a 5th grade teacher, teach all the subjects, but to 1 grade. Sounded crazy at first. I let it like ruminate my mind a little bit, and it really actually sounded really challenging and interesting. So I ended up doing it. Same thing with Last Man Standing. It sounded really ridiculous to start, but as I do things, it became more and more appealing. I said, all right, let's give it a try. So I think I only signed up maybe 2-3 weeks ahead of time. I knew about it before that, but I signed up pretty quick before. So I ended up with one of the very last numbers, which put me furthest from the start line that you could be. But I did that first one. I was done at, I guess it was maybe mile 68. I'm like, okay, one more lap and I'm done. The guy who I was running with, Kenneth Parnell, same thing. He's like, I'm going to go out and start this, and if Jason keeps going, I'm turning around. So he's ahead of me. He stops. Actually, we're talking for a little while, and I'm like, I actually apologized to him. I'm like, I know it takes 2 people to get to 100 miles, and I don't have it. Like, I am not going to do this. And I didn't tell him how much further I was going to go, but I told him I couldn't get to 100. Then he takes off on me a little bit. And then he decides to stop. He turns around, he shakes my hand, and says, "Congratulations, you won." And so I barely eked that thing out. He definitely could have done another loop, but he was done as well. And I came in, won the race. Probably would have been the last time I did a last man standing, but they gave me free entry the next year. So I felt like I had to go back. And at that point, I was totally hooked on that second year. Even though I think I ran 21 miles that second year.
Did you know anything about, so like my first, actually, JT at one point, my cousin who ran the race mentioned ultras to me. We did a little podcast, his podcast, and I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And that we're talking like 3 or 4 years ago. Then I see the race that eats its young. It was a documentary on Laz's other race, the one that's the Barclays. It's a documentary on the Barclays. If you haven't seen it, it's a great documentary on it. I saw that, and then I happened to just find. Then I think I might have looked up Laz and found what the Backyard Ultra was, and I think that's the first time I'd heard about it. And this is way after you've run. You've already competed and stuff. Like, did you, going into that, did you know the kind of anything else about the races, or I mean, you just saw this and.
I honestly thought it was invented in Maine by Will and Eric Cobb.
Right.
I had no idea. Somebody actually sent me a link to maybe the 2018 Big's Backyard, and so I looked at it and I'm like, what's all these DNFs? It's like there's only 3 people and everybody else didn't finish. But the race was still live, and he was really big on Courtney DeWalter, and she was in the top 3 there. I'm like, I have no idea who this is. Like, yeah, it's cool. It's a female. She's still in the race with all these people that didn't finish. Last Man Standing doesn't have the DNF. They don't have the did not finish. So I didn't know about that. So I had no idea who Laz was at that time. So that all came later. It came up like 3 years later.
Really?
I thought we were just doing some unique race in Maine.
And the thing I mean, there's many things I love about this style of race, but like ultras in general, like, I mean, you kind of went into your marathon and just did your thing and had success. But if I want to run a 2:45 marathon, I can look up the training plans and find, everything I need to do. And it pretty much, if I can hit those statistic points, I should be able to run the race at this pace. This last man standing stuff and ultra stuff, there is no playbook for a lot of it.
I agree. I was a big training plan guy within my marathons. I think I went in kind of mean on my first couple, like no training plan. Did what I was doing in college, and hopefully it would work for 26 miles. But I did hard training plans where you're working hard 3 days a week. And really, it was a point where I was either going to break or I was going to have great marathons. Like, you never knew before the marathon if your body was going to break first or if it wasn't. And luckily for me, it never did. But boy, it was close. There was times where I'm like, okay, my knee's going to blow out running this fast. But to your point with last man standing or backyards, yeah, the strategy, there is some strategy. I've slowly learned the strategy, but at that time, there were certainly no books about it. I don't even know if there are now, but it's totally different. And you just kind of learn as you go. You talk to people, see what they're doing. It sounds like a good idea. Maybe you try it. But yeah, it's kind of cool, the unknown part of that versus marathons, which have been so scientifically studied. People they know what you should be doing.
And so, what kind of have you made mistakes along the way? What kind of things have you kind of learned? Like, oh, I need to stay away from that, or this is too much or too little, or kind of what has. I guess that's such a broad question, but take it wherever way you want. There's lots of things to ask you on that.
Couple things come to mind there. One is speed training. Like, throw it out the window. Like,
altogether.
I don't think you need the speed training. The last couple of years, I haven't been able to speed train because it would cause injury. So I just put in long, slow miles, and my distances have gone through the roof doing that. I do think speed is important to some degree, and it really depends on where you start from. I'm a fairly fast runner to start with, so I don't need to work on the speed. But I think, like my buddy Jay Martin, who also runs Last Man Standing, he's like, yeah, speed's actually important, especially when it comes to the end of the race, because you got to make it in less than an hour. But for me, kind of throwing the speed stuff out a little bit and not doing as much or even any in the last couple of years has helped me. And then the other one is the whole goal setting thing. It's really hard not to have a goal, but it really is what you probably should do is not have a goal. My goal in 2018 was to run 100 miles at Last Man Standing, and nobody had done it yet. And 4 of us did it that year: Alan Groudle, Ryan Mativier, and David Kesterson and I. I did never experienced this before, but I've to 100. I think I'm done. Like, that's good. I made my goal. I went to 105 just in case everybody else dropped out, and I won the race. But I'd never experienced a goal as a limit before, and that's when I realized I was actually limiting myself. I wasn't really setting a pie in the sky goal, because clearly I actually could do it. So that's something I've learned along the way. I'm still not very good at it. I still have. I mean, people talk about A goals and B goals. That's something new in my vocabulary in the last couple of years. So I often will make like 5 goals. Like, first thing I want to do is get to 50 miles. Second thing I want to do is break the first backyard I ever did. And sometimes it's to beat somebody else's personal record. But honestly, I really shouldn't be doing the goal thing. I should just go out and run and just see what happens. Because your goals always explode anyway. Like, you find reasons to quit, or they're too easy and you make them.
Yeah, I've had the thought, like, the goal is to just enjoy it. Well, there's lots of that race you're not going to enjoy. It's like, oh, I'm not enjoying this. Do I back out? Like, oh, that doesn't work as a goal. I agree with you that I know JT struggles with that a lot. Like, if he feels himself not reaching, he sees that he thinks he's not going to make the goal, and he'll just back off. Like, okay, then what's the point? Where this race forces you, if you're going to keep going, to literally pass that barrier and just one more and then see what happens.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I was just saying, in college, I have several friends who ran at UNH with me. They will not toe the line unless they're in peak shape and put in a great race. Like, if they can't meet their goal, if they don't think they can meet their goal already, they don't even go. And I've never really understood that. Like, you put all that training in, at least see what you can do realistically. But yeah, I can understand what JT is saying though. Like, setting that goal, you get halfway through a race, you're like, there's no way I'm going to make it. Like, why keep going, right?
And I just ran Millinocket this last year, and I had kind of done that goal kind of thinking, and the wheels fell off, and I was completely humbled. But I got done, and after a couple of days, and I looking back, I was like, well, maybe that's kind of the point too. You know what I mean? Like, being humbled isn't a bad place to be. And I do think this pursuit. I mean, you can twist an ankle a mile in, and you're not going to get to your goal. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many variables in a 24 plus hour run, right?
Yeah. I guess spraining an ankle would probably be a good time to quit. Rather than pushing on.
How miserable would that be? Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. Go ahead. So during the race we ran into each other. You were running and you had some light issues, and JT and I came up behind you, and that, we started running together. And JT and I really wanted to, like, we had both talked about wanting to make this more of a pleasurable, like, get to know people, kind of experience the atmosphere, not be just focused, and really try to enjoy the whole thing. And we really wanted to be helpful to other runners. And so you gave us that little opportunity to be helpful, but I gotta confess. So it probably was a time when I was starting to get into my little darkness. And I remember I had mentioned like it probably makes sense for you to run in the middle between our lights. And then from there on out, in my head, every corner I was running the outside of the corner, running the furthest distance of anybody. and and I'm and I just feel the grumpiness building up in my head. And I got done the lap. I'm like, I think you thanked us and whatever. And I quickly like snapped out of it. Like, what is that? Like, but it's the mental tricks this race can play on you, and for with lack of sleep and an effort and things like that. Like, but thank you for that opportunity to help you. At least afterwards, I felt like I helped out somebody.
Ah, with your email, I probably would have made it, but boy, was my light dim. And when you guys came up, I couldn't help just ask to run by you. And that's actually probably the fourth or fifth time at Last Man Standing I've had to do that. Todd Rutlinger's helped me out twice in another race. Ed Clifford helped me out once because I actually fell and my light went off and into the trail or into the woods, and he helped me find it. So there's been a lot of people out there helping. But it sounds like you were to the point where you're kind of getting a little competitive, like it's towards the end of the race, right? kind
No,
of.
it wasn't even that. Just the mental focus was the night's getting long and just being tired and grumpy. There wasn't, and just there was a point where JT and I split up. It's like, oh, I can kind of move myself, or like I was constantly on the outside and he was on the inside, or vice versa. And it just little things start to irritate you. I find, and you have to like push those away, because there's lots of, is that a thing? Is my hip bugging me? Is that going to be a thing? I just, yeah, I wasn't, at no point was I actually like, it's weird because normally competitiveness is such, like, I can't help it. For whatever reason, that race, I didn't feel much of that. I was really just enjoying the race.
Yeah, and I take the same mentality going into Last Man Standing, especially, or the backyards. Enjoy it as long as you can, because there's going to be a lot of pain too. But also just socialize. I mean, those early laps are a lot of fun. A lot of us are just enjoying ourselves at that point. Some people are pushing their limits already after two good free loops, and it's fun. It's fun to run with those folks and see them through those struggles, while just being kind of cheery and helping them out a little bit. But it is an excellent opportunity for socialization. These backyard ultras are.
Yeah, and you live local to the course, right? Am I right?
I live about an hour away.
Oh, okay, so not that local. Okay. Yeah. What do you think? Actually, I want to ask you, how is that course compared to the woods course of Biggs, the trail of Biggs? I know part of it's on the road, but like,
Yeah. Pineland is easier as far as the footing goes. I think elevation wise, they might be really similar. I'm not 100% positive on that. Laz is pretty hush hush about his course. He asks you not to use Strava on there, so that nobody's coming to run his backyard. Um, but I think elevation wise, it's probably pretty similar, but it's a bit more technical at Biggs. But then you add in the night loop, and it like totally changes things. Pineland is way harder because you're in the woods the whole time.
what do you think? So, I mean, who knows what limits are, and we talked about setting goals, but like 200 on last man standing, like how much harder is that of an accomplishment than the Biggs 200 that you've been able to do?
I would probably say 54 miles harder at Pineland, only because when you get to 146 at Biggs, the next 54 are on road. So if you're a confident road runner and it's pretty flat, you when I got to 146, I'm like, okay, 200 is definitely happening. Like I felt like that when I got to 146, just because it was roads and easy. And Pineland you're just going to be in the woods all night. Again, this is the second night we're talking about. So Pineland's a bit harder in that regard. So I don't know. I don't know if it's really 54 yards harder, but at that point in the day, I think it is.
Right. And what is it like going? So, like, having been somebody that like 100's totally conceivable. The gap from 100 to 200, right? What's like, how much harder is it?
Yeah. So 100 seemed absolutely crazy to me at first. And I was determined that I could get from that 71 that I had done in 2016 to 100 in 2019, I think it was. I felt confident about it, but I still didn't know if it was. I didn't know if it was possible. So that was a big thing. And then I ran a couple years, I think 2020 or 19 and 20. I ran 117 and then 134. So when I qualified for bigs, I had 134 was my distance, and my goal going into bigs was definitely to get to 200, and that's a big jump. That's 100 kilometers that I'm adding on trying to get to that 200. But when I ran daily, it felt pretty good, and I got onto that night loop and realized what night loop was. I got a lot of confidence that I could bridge that if I could get to the second day loop at bigs. I felt confident that I could get to the 200. I mean, I wasn't like super confident because there was a lot of running to do still. But once I got to the night loop, I felt confident that 200 was possible. And it's probably more mental than physical. I'm a road runner. I run 95% of my miles on roads, and I feel super comfortable on them. It's way hillier at my house than it is at Laz's house, at least on the road. And I think that confidence makes a big difference, even if training wise you're not not as good as you think you are.
As so like comparison wise, like when you finished like 135, 134, whatever that number was, compared to like when you finished the 200, like how much more beat up was your body afterwards, or was there not that much difference?
That's a good question. Because at last man standing, when I got that 134, I was beat for hours before that, like hours and hours and hours. I've never been mad at somebody at a race except Ed Clifford. I thought he had run 100 mile. I had heard that he had run 100 mile before. And I figured he'd get to 105 and be like, all right, I'm good. 105 sounds good. And Ryan Mativier was watching, and I'm like, oh, this is going to end pretty soon. He's like, I don't think it is, man. You better keep running. And I was so mad at Ed for keeping on running. I wanted that. I wanted to get to bigs. I didn't need out a bunch of miles to get there. I just had to win last man standing. And I was just totally miffed at him for many loops. And then eventually I said, like, this is my race. Like, it doesn't matter what he's doing. I just need to keep running. So I just kept making these little goals to keep myself going. And I think I actually finished better than I was 2 laps before, or 4 laps, or 6 laps before that. I actually finished stronger than those. And I didn't know that I'd won or anything. Ed was still on the course. Um, yeah, I feel like I lost my train of thought there, but
And in comparison to how beat up your body is to 200.
oh, comparing that to 200?
Yeah, how bad you
Question.
felt kind of after, because I'm trying to like conceptual like is you're just in the grind and your body's getting beat up either way, or is there a sizable difference between the toll it takes on you?
Yeah, so 200, I mean, was a kind of a magical moment. Like, really, it was huge. I was like beaming. My wife's got a picture of me walking up the road, very confident I'm going to get in there for 200. And I think the psychological piece to the 200 made it easier than getting to 134 at last man standing. However, I only lasted a few more loops. I forget how many more loops did I make it. 4. I think I made it 4 more loops after 200 on that first try, and it got hard out there. I met that huge milestone of 200, and then mentally, I didn't have it anymore. I just started deteriorating mentally, but physically, I think it's pretty. I think I kind of felt the same in both.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've tried. It's so crazy to me. Like literally 3-4 years ago, I thought 26.2 was impossible for me. And now it's like And then this last year was like, okay, it's 100 possible. And it's like, and now I'm like, it's 200 possible. Yeah, it's crazy these progressions on this in this sport. Um, so I think Jason told me that Jason Giroux, uh, said that you're not a big fan of a lot of miles. That it's not really super necessary. Does that sound right?
Yeah. So, um, as far as the long run goes, the long run of the week, that's where I kind of draw the line. It's okay to have a bunch of pretty good miles, like 10 to 15 mile days, but I when I was doing marathon training, I was on those plans, and a lot of them called for a 20-mile long run. Then a couple years or a couple races, I tried a 30-mile long run, and I just felt depleted going into going into the actual marathon, and I didn't feel like that 30-mile was helpful at all. So I bumped it back down to 20, and I felt good going into my races. I read books about ultra runners sometimes, and some people could just go for hours and hours and hours on a training run. I've never felt like that on a training run. It's only in these races do I feel like I could go on for a really long time. I just feel beat up. Maybe it's because I'm doing roads. That could be part of it. I feel like a 3 hour run is plenty long on a road. So I've pretty much set my limit at 20 miles for my long run. And I don't ever do like back to back long runs. I've never tried that. It's always an easy day on either side, maybe even a rest day on one side of that. Um, and that's what works for me. It keeps my energy level up, keeps my injuries down, and it's just something that's really worked well for me. So I think I told Jason about that just in conversation, just about people are always asking like, how do you train for one of these things? We all have our different methods. A lot of people love the double long run on the weekend. I've never tried it, so I can't say if it's good or not.
Part of I know. So like this past year, leading into Last Man Standing, JT and I are both kind of debating on like how we're going to approach this and what's going to get us to our best results. And we're just trying to replicate. You're trying to find things that replicate the feeling of being uncomfortable to get more comfortable with uncomfortable. So like, and we've talked about like we do like a 30-20. So we do a 30 and the next day I do a 20. And that it was always shocking that my body could handle the 20 and it was like super slow. Like it felt like I was running all right, but then I'd look at my pace and it'd be, brutally slow. Like every fast twitch fiber in my legs is completely depleted. And, it felt like, I'm making progress on this end, but like kind of like what you've spoken to, the injuries were definitely like, I mean, part of that might be that I'm 47, but little things kept creeping up. And I spent a year just focused on miles, just solely just get as much throw miles at the problem. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of now thinking that I'm glad I went through that because I have a trust in my body that I don't know if I would have had otherwise, but I don't think that's the best approach. I'm more kind of thinking along the lines that you are, that rest and recovery are as important in how you feel in your runs. And, going super long distances doesn't just set to me just as like I made 100-mile attempt just to get 100 under my belt going into Last Man Standing, which I didn't make it to 100, but I was set back them for like 2-3 weeks after that recovering.
Yeah.
Were
Yeah.
yeah.
Something you said made me think of something. I think forgetfulness is a trait that I have, and I think it's actually like a little superpower as far as running and ultra running goes. um, I never like to look at a course before I run it. I like to just hop in that day, so it's totally fresh, totally new and novel. It's that psychological, like anything that's novel is more exciting and interesting. And it takes me, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 times around a loop before I start to actually remember things that are out there. And so the boringness doesn't start until like 8, 10, 12 hours in. And then the same thing with thinking about the double long run. if you run 30 one day, you're thinking about that 30 the next day, like when you're running your 20, and you're dreading it already. Whereas if you spread for me, 20 miler one week, and then 2 weeks later doing it again, I don't remember that 20 miler so much. It's like, all right, I'm doing a 20 miler. This is something a little bit new. And I think psychologically, that's really helpful. I don't know, physically, it helps you as much as doing, double long runs, but psychologically, I think it helps a ton. Just forgetting about that. And same thing, like you probably experienced this, or maybe you haven't yet because you've done one last man. But I forget. I forgot what happened the first year, and the second year I was all like, yeah, I only remember the good parts. And then not till a ways in do you remember the bad. So having a full year basically helps a ton too, as far as forgetting how hard it really was.
JT and I decided we went out for a training run. We went to Last Man Standing just to see the course. And we ran the loop once, and we were so intimidated after, like what have we got into? What are we thinking we can do this? Like, we're struggling to do these distances on the road, that's flatter, and then we got into it, and it didn't feel anywhere near as bad as what we thought in our heads after just that one loop or two loops.
Yeah. So down at Biggs, so I don't know if I just barely met you, but my strategy at the beginning of Backyard Ultras is to walk the first 7 minutes, just enjoy, take in the scenery, look to the side instead of forward. And so I'm always at the back. So
you know what? I want to say that I've kind of come to that conclusion. I've been thinking about that, not specifically 7 minutes, but like, yeah. It's interesting how sometimes you like, I have to beat my head up against the wall. I wish I could have talked to you a year ago, 2 years ago, because I might have come to these conclusions a little quicker. But yeah, I'm with you. Okay, keep going. So at Biggs.
Yeah, so I go down to Biggs, and this is still my strategy. I've never been there. I've never seen the course. So I'm out there walking with, I think there was 38 of us that first year. And by the time so you go down the road a little bit, and you turn around, come back, and then go into the woods. I'm going into the woods. There's nobody around. I'm a little freaking out because I'm like, I really don't know where I'm going. I hope that I can follow all these signs. It'd be a real bummer to go to Tennessee and get knocked out in the first loop.
One lap.
Yeah. So it was about 18 minutes, I think, until I saw my first person out there. I'd caught them. I'd been running for 11 minutes. So that strategy, I mean, if you feel like you're going to get lost, like, I wouldn't recommend that strategy for a brand new race, but I did it, and I made it through. And another woman from Northern Ireland, I think it was Northern Ireland, did a great race over there and came here, and she got lost on loop 3, and she got eliminated. She got timed out doing that. It's such a big trip and such a bummer to have something like that happen.
What is your
third loop?
Right. So let's talk pace strategy. JT and I went, I don't know, we went a little too fast, I think, this past time. I don't know. We decided everybody's walking the hills. But I had the thought, I'm like, why start walking before my heart rate even climbs? So we go like a quarter way up the hill, which in some ways it was kind of nice. Like, if I was in a group of people that I kind of wanted to get some breathing space, I could separate a little bit. But I think that might have cost me. We were I remember my aunt and uncle at one point, they came the first evening, and they're like, you guys are in first or second and third place. And I didn't have the energy to explain to them that really means nothing. But it was actually like her telling me that was like, oh no, I might have made a mistake. Like it was like she thought she was telling us a positive thing.
Yeah, right.
And now, but I tried, before doing this race, I had done, just to try the format. I had tried it. And my purpose that time, I tried to go as slow as possible. Like come in with just enough time to grab a drink and go back out and not have rest, which I think, and that did not work out well for me either. It didn't seem like. Where do you think the sweet spot kind of is? What are you thinking strategy wise, pace wise on these races?
Yeah. So I've done every last man standing. So I was there at the beginning. I thought it was the beginning. I didn't realize they've been doing it since 2011 down in Tennessee. But
Right, right.
really interesting to see the transformation in the runners from then till now. I think I averaged maybe 39 minutes per loop on that first one. The guy who came in second, Ken, he finished like 36 minutes per loop. There was a guy out there running 29s for 50, a little bit more than 50K, I think. I don't think he got the format. Like, he didn't get it at all. I think he might have thought it was like cumulative time or something. But anyway, I would say that pretty much everyone that year ran faster than they would now. And I mean, I don't know how it really happened, but I feel like Ryan Mativier, when he came in, he's a coach and a runner, and I think he had some strategy going into it, and I think he kind of slowed down the entire field, or him and his people that he runs with, slowed down the whole field down to 48-minute loops, and I think now they're more like 50, 51 is sort of the sweet spot. For me, I don't go by pace at the beginning. I just go by feel and also who do I want to chat with. If somebody's going a little bit faster, I'll run with them for a loop. Then I'll run with somebody that's slower for a loop. I'm all over the place. My first is typically like 48. Second loop's in the mid 30s because I always run that entire loop. And then I kind of settle in. And by lap 6 or 7, then I start getting consistent. And it's probably in the 48 to 50-minute time frame, and then just a slow degradation the rest of the race until you usually just mentally quit. Even though you still have 3 minutes left, I usually still quit. I finally got over that barrier, though. As you saw at the Bigs thing, I was within 30 seconds that time.
Right.
So, woman Jennifer Russo, she was the only female on the U.S. backyard team this year, and I watched and raced against her down in DC last spring, and she was so impressive. Like, I don't know how many loops she ran that were more than 57 minutes, but it was a ton. I couldn't believe that she could do it on that little rest. So I tried to channel the Jennifer Russo in at Bigs this year, and I feel like I successfully did it to some degree. It was still mental though. I still collapsed, but I think I got 4 loops that were 57 minutes or over. So just learning to cope with that is it's hard, but I think it's a way to add a bunch of loops.
What are you doing on your your rests? I mean, obviously early on it's different, but like once you're into the race, like how much are you like? Here's the thing, and I swear, like when we got down to like the 10, 15 runners left, I was by far the most in my head. I was by far the most uncomfortable runner starting every lap. Like I couldn't even take strides that looked like normal runner. It would be once I got around the grass, that's where my legs would finally loosen back up, and then it's like, okay, I finally can run again. And it was one thing that kind of helped me. It's like, okay, I just got to get to this point, and then I'll feel better. So I just knew what I had to do. But I'm like, man, why am I so stiff? Is there something I'm doing wrong? And then nutrition wise, I'm like, what are you doing on your when you're in between loops?
So that stiffness thing has been a major issue for me in my first 5 backyards maybe, and I think water was a big part of it. Calories was another big part of it, and then also just running too fast. Those are the 3 things that's going to stiffen you up the most. So I've definitely slowed down. I definitely drink a ton more water. I carry, I think, 12 to 16 ounces on every loop, and consume or try to consume all of that, as well as taking some pretty big guzzles at the aid station at the start. And I try to, when I get in, I try to eat immediately, so I have the rest of the time to digest that a little bit, get some calories in me. I don't usually stretch out until just before the next loop. I just watch other people stretch out, so I do some of the same things that they do, leg swings, high knees kind of thing, just to loosen it up a little bit. Going through one night, I never found that I needed sleep, and I couldn't either. I would try, but I couldn't sleep. But in the last 2 years, I've become an expert sleeper. I can fall asleep almost instantly, uh, but only in a zero gravity chair. I can't lay on the ground. It's got to be a zero gravity chair, and I can fall asleep instantly. At Biggs this year, I think I did a 20-second nap because that's how long I had. So I got a quick one in there. Down at Capitol Backyard in DC last spring, I had car troubles. The whole van was packed, ready to go down to DC, and it stopped working. I had to transfer everything from my minivan over to my Toyota Prius, and the zero gravity wouldn't fit. So I went down there without it. I did get a lawn chair from a relative down there, which is awesome. But going into night 2, or in the middle of night 2, actually, there was a woman who had dropped out, and her zero gravity chair was sitting outside her tent. I just went over and grabbed her chair, I threw it in my tent, and I slept every loop after that, like 10-minute nap, 6 to 10-minute nap, every loop. And it was just amazing. Like, I felt so much better doing that. So sleeping, once you get really into it becomes, I think, really, really important. So I
I
think I
imagine.
answered your question. So yeah,
Yeah,
eating,
yeah,
drinking.
yeah. I mean, could you? Yeah, the whole sleep thing. And have you considered like trying to do like a faster lap so then you can get some extra sleep, or is that just you're just causing yourself trouble by going faster?
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people who have tried that. Like somebody at Biggs last year, like 39-minute loop at night, like in the 160-ish mile range, and he couldn't fall asleep because his heart rate was up. And he couldn't fall asleep. So I may not walk as much on a loop, trying to get a little extra sleep, but I do try to keep it at a moderate run so that I can fall asleep. But honestly, I think I can almost go top speed now and fall asleep when I lay down, because I did a 24-hour race down in Rhode Island last year, and I was trying to go fast the whole time. I didn't have any trouble falling asleep. Like,
I'm in the same boat that way. I can just, I'd be more worried about waking up and my ability to wake
yeah,
up.
having somebody there for that is like, that's key. It makes it so you can sleep, first of all, because you're not thinking about it,
Right.
and then also make sure you don't time out.
And then nutrition on the race. What are your thoughts on that?
Real food for sure. I'd say exclusively at this point. Last year at Last Man Standing, I tried doing a goo because it was, I don't know, 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and I just needed low caffeine, and I just dry heaved like immediately. That thing was in my mouth for less than a second, and I just can't handle that stuff anymore. So if I can get some real food, somebody told me you can actually drink caffeine. I didn't know that. I don't know why I didn't know that. I'm not a coffee drinker, but there's actually drinks out there that just have caffeine in them, and I honestly didn't know that. So I've been doing that now, and it makes a big difference. But really, at the beginning, homemade American chop suey was sort of my go-to. That's what I was kind of known for back then, was the chop suey guy. And I do actually still bring some sort of Italian dish with beef in it to the race, and I eat that sometimes. I eat a ton of fruit. My wife and my other crew, TJ and John, have basically been doing smorgasbord stuff with me now. They just put a whole bunch of stuff on a plate because they have no idea what I'm going to want. I have no idea what I'm going to want until I get there. And that banana doesn't look good that lap, but they pull it out again and show it to you again the next lap. You're like, oh, that actually sounds pretty good now.
Yeah,
So really just real food and trying to get enough calories, which I honestly don't know what is that number. I don't know the numbers. Some people do, but I don't know what those numbers are, because honestly, some laps I'm not going to be able to take very much, and others hopefully I can catch up a little bit.
yeah.
So
No, I'm totally with you on the real food thing, and I think variety is definitely something I've noticed. Like, because you just get sick of that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. JT and I had
Oh,
an Amato sandwich waiting for us at we're gonna eat it at midnight, and we were just so excited for that Amatos at midnight, and it was the best sandwich I've ever had in my life.
yeah, I've gotten to the point where I actually pretty much don't plan my food. My wife does it. I'm like, don't tell me what you're getting. Like, just surprise me, because that's a psychological thing. Like, anything that I pick out, I'm not gonna want to eat.
My my family, we finished the loop, and my wife and my two girls were there, and they had gone, and my daughter's boyfriend, and they'd gone to a Greek restaurant like a half hour away, and they're telling me about how good like they were so surprised. It's like this hole in the wall. It was so good, and they're going on and on about their meals, and I'm just sitting there like, and you didn't bring me anything. Like every one of these sounds so good to me. Like, are you just torturing me here?
I have a fun food story for you.
Go ahead.
So I'm at Biggs. My wife stays with me. My other buddy John, who's also crewing me, goes downtown to get a burger, one for him, one for me. And this is, what is it, 48 loops in, so 200 miles. And he's bringing this burger up to me. And then one of the guys in the race, he passes out. He's already just watching it at this point, but he passes out on the road. My wife catches him and like, oh, are you okay? Are you okay? Like, can we get you something? He's like, oh, maybe a burger or something. So my buddy pulls a burger out of his bag and gives him the burger. And I didn't know anything about this at the time. So this other runner ended up getting my burger, and my buddy John had to run to the store again and get another one. So that was kind of a fun little food story anyway. And the same guy, this is also same race, Biggs last year. He's got a what's that? A half quart, not a half quart. That's a pint, half gallon. He's got a half gallon of vanilla EDs, and he's eating that when I walk by his tent. And I just run into my tent, and I'm like, tell my wife, like, we got a clean spoon. Give me a clean spoon. And I walked back over to his tent. I leaned in. I'm like, man, can I have some of that? And I took 2 big spoonfuls. It was like probably the peak moment nutritionally of the whole race. Like, it felt so good to eat that ice cream.
Bet it did. Yeah, we had that at Last Man Stand. They were serving chicken noodle soup, and unexpectedly we came back, and my wife or somebody had, you guys want some chicken noodle soup? And JT and I were just like salivating immediately. Pavlov dogs right there, just suck that.
Yeah.
That broth was so good. Yeah. Do you have I mean, you obviously keep yourself in shape. Do you have like a nutritional plan that you try to stick to during the year? Like, what are your thoughts on nutrition in general outside of racing?
I'm terrible. I'm a big ice cream eater, like all summer long. I don't eat as much in the winter. My wife is Catholic. I'm not, but I do practice Lent a little bit. I give up sugar every year. I've done it for 25 years now, even before I met my wife. Just trying to take off some of those winter pounds a little bit between February and April. Um, I always gain weight in the winter. I don't know what to do, but every year I made it up.
I think you're a little far away from your computer or something. I'm losing the audio.
Are you totally out?
I think it's a distance thing. If you back up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I'll try
But
to
you gain weight in the winter.
Yeah, I gained weight. So I got up to 191 this year, like just after Christmas. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like as far as wear and tear
What would you say what would you say race weight is? Just to give a perspective.
On the year. Every year.
Ideal base race weight.
I'm trying to get to 170 because that's where I was at when I was really racing well with speed and distance. So that's been my goal. I'm not being successful really at all. I'm doing a semi keto diet. I've kind of given up sugar for Lent, but there's just a lot of days where I cheat. I used to be really strong with that, and I would not have any sugar for like 45 days. Now I'm like, yeah, once a week I can have a handful of M&Ms or something. But nutritionally, I don't do well, to be honest. And looking at people that run these backyards, I think that I might be in the same boat as a lot of people. The
You know,
body type is not that lean, muscle, fast.
yeah, there's only a few Jason Drews out there.
Yeah. So I don't have any nutritional advice to give anybody, to be honest. I could be
So,
doing a lot better on that.
so you just put it into work to not. I mean, you're obviously staying in shape. I mean, I'm guessing you're someone that doesn't just, exercise is just part of your daily routine.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, at the low in the winter, I might get down to 20 miles a week. But it's probably typically, I'd say 30 if I'm not training for anything. And then it bumps up to 40 to 70 when I'm training for something. So, I mean, I've been running since 7th grade. I don't know how many years that is. 32 years. I really haven't taken that long. Just been really, really, really consistent over that period of time. Injuries here and there, but I'll switch over to swimming or biking if that works for me. But just really consistent on the exercise for sure. And that's my only weight plan. Like I don't I don't seem to be able to do it nutritionally. But if I up the miles, I can lose weight.
No, any weights or anything like that, or any strengthening kinds of stuff?
No, so I work at our school, and my house is 8 miles from there. I don't pass any gyms. The gym's on the other side of my house, and I just never make it up there. I used to lift weights back in my marathoning days at college. Did a lot of weights, but not since. I'm trying to do some strength stuff now without weights, so push-ups, squats, pogo bouncing, stuff like that, just to build a little bit of that strength. But it's something I have limited time, and running is my passion, so I pretty much run. I don't do a lot of other stuff. I try to, but I'm not super successful with it. It's mostly just running, just because of time. Like my kids are 4 and 11, so they think it's fun to like sit down and do some sit-ups and push-ups once in a while and do these fun little activities. But I don't go to the gym. I think I've been to the gym twice in the last year, as far as in the weight room.
Is
So
is
it's just
there through your so like this past race, my for me, my two issues, my toes, they got pretty beat up, and
yep.
my quads were pretty gassed. And I'm like, okay, I need to address, like, those are the two things that I need to address. And I think both of them might be fixed by just doing backwards down the steeper hills. But I don't know if you saw I think one of the guys I think he placed second or third. This last year was going down the hills backwards. I don't know if you ever saw him doing that.
I don't think I did, but I've
It,
seen other people do that. Yeah.
it was shocking when I saw him do it. I'm like, what's he doing? I'm like, and I'm like, oh, it kind of makes sense, but I don't dare to try it first, on this course. But I think that would save my toes for sure a little bit, and possibly my quads. But like, for you, like, is there, like, when you've got done some of these races and you're starting to look at push out your distance, where in your body has failed, and like, how do you even try to address those, or do you even think of it that way?
Yeah, that's interesting. My body has held up pretty well during them. At Bigs last year, around mile 160, my right knee just suddenly started hurting. It's the longest I've ever run. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense that something might happen. But I knew that it popped up in the race, so it probably wasn't going to kill me long term to keep going on it. But I started asking around, like, anybody have a knee brace? Anybody have a knee brace? And a guy named Steve Slavey, also from Maine, Dresden, was there, and he had one. I knew somebody would have a knee brace. And he gave it to me. I put it on, and I ran a loop like that, and it brought out all these other little pains that I didn't know were there, because it just changed my stride. So I ended up just tearing it off like halfway through that loop and bringing it back, and then just trying to focus on running more smoothly. And I don't know the knee issue went away, but it got better. It got manageable. Yeah, toes toes typically get me when I'm running faster, not at a last man standing kind of thing. Marathons kill my toes for sure. Um, but it's mostly fatigue and then the brain just saying, I'm done. I've always thought it was my body, but I'm pretty convinced every time I've quit it's because of my brain. It's not really my body. I wanted to ask you. So I saw some pictures of you from Last Man Standing. Your quads are pretty like you're strong. Like, do you do some other sport other than running?
I'm just short. It's literally just genetics, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I did so in high school, like football. We'd be in the weight room, and I always had very strong legs. Like I broke the high school squatting record the first time I ever squatted. So I did have strong legs, but I don't do anything particularly to work them out besides lots of running. Um, yeah. So no, and if anything, I think maybe my little bit of muscle mass hurts. Um, I think being leaner is probably a better place to be. I don't know.
Except, I mean, the fat stores help for these long races. You don't want to be
Yeah,
too lean.
right. And I do so much fasting. I usually fast like like right now I don't eat till 3 o'clock every day. I usually do 3 hours of exercise a day, during the morning and then lunchtime. So like I'm always on empty, and part of my it's back to that whole thinking of like replicating the discomfort of a last man when I'm
Yeah.
when I'm on my hour lunch run or whatever, and I'm feeling pretty gassed. I am pretty gassed, and it's the closest I get to that feeling when I'm out there. And then there's a certain amount of confidence that I figure there's going to be a point where I don't want to digest food on the race.
Yeah.
And I know I can go. I mean, I've done a 5-day fast with full Ironman training. I'm like, I know my body has the storage to keep me going. So I have confidence because I ran into one of the guys that I think he did finish second. There was a point in the race where he was really struggling on the course, and I came up to him, and he's like, I can't keep anything down. I think this might be my last lap. And I'm thinking back to the competitiveness that did. I'm like, oh, I might creep up to fifth place, because I knew I was starting to get to my end too.
Yeah.
But I have that confidence that if I can't eat, like that's not a problem. I can just keep going as long as I'm hydrated.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's all good either. I think my body's so adapted to being on empty that it's not used to actually like taking in food and performing with food in it. So I have to bridge that gap.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a Facebook group for the U.S. backyard team this year, and I put out questions pretty often actually. But one of them was about nutrition and what people do, especially because I have gotten the habit of throwing up during races. It's not something I did early on, but it's become a regular thing. Um, and Laz, he chimed in. He's like, the human body is designed for this. Like, it doesn't even need the food. Like, if you don't feel like you can eat, don't eat. Just keep running. So I think that runs with your philosophy like perfectly. You should be able to do it, but maybe training for it actually does help a little bit too, versus somebody who eats all the time trying to pull that one, try to run 100 miles with no food.
Right. Yeah. So let me ask you. So, I mean, Laz is this, I've seen him on like I said, the documentary, and then, he's such an interesting guy. I don't know how much you've been able to interact with him in your couple times there, but he's something else.
He is. He actually reminds me of my dad a ton, which is really funny. They kind of look alike. Um, kind of quiet to themselves kind of people, but um, yeah, he is an interesting guy. He's very inspirational. I mean, he's really meditative about stuff, and I met him back in 2023. No, 2021. 2021 was the first time I went to Biggs, And I just remember walking in there. He's just writing everybody's names on flags for their spot at Biggs, and very approachable. My crew and I, TJ and I, went and talked to him, and it was kind of a surreal experience. His backyard is way smaller than it looks if you look at YouTube videos. So we arrived there, and it just felt like such a small, close space, and all the people there looked so much bigger than they do on YouTube. Like Courtney DeWalter looked so much bigger in person than she did on the YouTube videos that I'd seen, which is usually just the opposite. Like all these actors you see on television or movies, they're actually way smaller than they look on the screen. But I found the reverse to be true there. But Laz, he's an interesting guy. I think that we both really like enjoy nature, embracing that, and being outside and not being comfortable. So I connect with him on that level. He's a little he can get on people's nerves for sure, just like my own father can for us. And so it was nothing too hard for me to embrace. But what he's done is really pretty incredible, and it's really cool that I think this whole thing is going to live well past him. A lot of races, when whoever's the director moves on to something else, the race ends. And I don't think that's going to happen with the backyard. I think it's got legs of its own at this point.
It's literally a worldwide thing. I mean, to come up
Yeah,
with a race that's around the world, it's crazy.
I think there's 1,000 races now or something like that in the world, something like that. It's huge.
And we're still at the forefront of it. You know what I mean? I talk to people all the time, and they have the same kind of initial response, like, that sounds crazy. And then they'll get back to me and be like, what was that race again? And I just I have a coworker who, well, I swim a couple of times a week, and one of the guys swimming with me, he's like, oh, I just heard about a ski race. It's the same kind of format that what you're doing, where you ski up the mountain, you ski back down, you have an hour loop. And my coworker's like, I'm in on that. Like, that's my thing. I'm training for that next year. Like, it's even starting to branch off into different things. It's pretty remarkable.
It is. I actually tried to sign up for that this year.
Did you?
But it was totally full, and the waiting list was huge. And
Yeah, I
I've
think
never
it's.
skied up, so I skied down, but I never skied up.
Yeah. Oh man, where was I gonna go next? I had a good thing for you, but so Jason, when I mentioned you agreed to be on, he's like, oh great, he's the most humble badass I know. And I think if Jason's calling anybody a badass, that's pretty remarkable, because he's pretty much one himself. I mean, first thoughts, any thoughts on that? And then why do you do this stuff? And like, what is your, I'm sure people come up to you and like, if it comes up, or for most people, this is such a foreign thing to do, something that is going to be so incredibly uncomfortable, trying to find your limits and pushing yourself. And, what is it about this that gravitates you to it, and why you keep doing it? And yeah, I keep asking you all these really broad questions, so take it any place you want.
It's really the limit thing is a huge part of it. Like, what's the limit? I'm a math teacher, so I know what a limit is mathematically, and I may be approaching my limit because I've done 3 races in the 50-hour range at this point, and I don't seem to be able to get past that. But I still have confidence that I don't really know. Like, I don't know what I'm capable of. That's what's drawn me to it, and the day of the race, just the experience of it. It is truly the most social race I've ever been a part of, where I can run with the quote last place person, and so I can still do really well and have a great conversation with them, and get to see them approach their limit, whether it's 2 laps, 3 laps, 10 laps, whatever it is. I just love getting out there, cheering people on. I love having conversations with different people. I know some folks, I mean, it sounds like you and JT ran a lot together in your first last man standing. I typically bounce around a ton. I don't stick with any one person until the end, because then you don't have a choice, because there's not very many people or maybe nobody that's running your pace.
Right.
Um, so I intentionally don't run with Ryan Mativier early in races now, because I know that later in the race we'll have plenty of time to to chat, because we run very similar paces, and I know he's in it for the long haul. But I just love the social side of it. That's actually a conversation I wanted to bring up today. I was in Quebec last week for February vacation, and we had a conversation. It was 10 adults there, and talking about being an extrovert or an introvert. I've always considered myself an introvert, and one of my friends, Sarah, described me as an extrovert. I'm like, really? Like, I don't think I'm an extrovert. But one place where I totally agree with her, being an extrovert, is at a race or while exercising. Not even at a race, but just exercising. When my blood is flowing, I'd like to talk. I like to have great conversations with people. When my blood's flowing, I don't have that much interest. It's really interesting. But at last man standing, I'm super social. I'm talking to everybody I can. I always feel like I want to talk to every single person there, because it's a fairly small race, 100 people or less usually. And I always feel like bad when I'm like, oh, I don't know who that person is. How did I not run with that person? So really, it's the social side, and then pushing the limits is another part of it. I've gone to last man standing 4 times to try to win, and I've gone there 3 times to run, just to be part of that environment, not necessarily pushing my limits, whether it was injury or not wanting to overdo it. So I just love the social part of it. It was so cool. Last year, I stopped at 5 a.m. You were still running. I don't remember how many more people were still running at that time, but it was so nice to sit by the fire, eat some food. You guys were out running, and then you guys came through, giving you that's a really fun to see that side of the event as well. Not a great mentality if you're trying to push yourself, though, because it's awfully appealing to sit by the fire.
Did you back off a little bit because you knew Biggs was coming up?
Yeah, the last 2 years. Yeah. 2 years ago, I was trying to do 50. Actually, I decided to do 54 because it would get me to 500 miles at last man standing total over the first 6 years. And then this year, I was trying to go for 100. I wasn't feeling it. I just told myself it's not really worth keeping going. I was 3 weeks off of a 24-hour race. I was trying to do what I call the Harvey Lewis plan, which is to run as many ultra marathons as close together as you can. It's not for me, I've decided. Anyway, I was toast. I'm glad that I did drop out, because Biggs was still a struggle. My body, I was overtrained, I think, for the first time in my life. I ran 2,800 and something miles last year. I'm typically around 2,000, maybe even a little bit less than that. Yeah, so I was definitely not going for it the last couple of years at last man standing. But this year I'm coming back. I'm going for real this year.
Yeah, I so this past year, just where you met, I did 3,600 miles last year, and it's just stupid. I think just dumb. I know, and I've mentally decided I'm going to focus on the time, and not like so many times I go out for a run. It's like I have to get 15 in today. I have to get 15 in, to make my week. I want 120 this week. And it was always just this number. I was a math teacher for 5 or 6 years, and like I'm numbers. Like, and it's like, no, this year, like, you're going for a 3-hour run, and it's going to be whatever it's going to be. You're going for an hour. You're going and trying to think of, and then and trying to like do, because if I just, like last year I was so focused on miles, I wouldn't go on a trail run because I couldn't get the mile. Like, I was slower on the trail, and I wouldn't get my distance in. It's like, no, just those trail runs, just because it's less distance doesn't actually, a lot of times it's harder, so I'm trying to, like, so much of this journey I've been on, for me, is finding these weaknesses in my mind, the weaknesses in the way I think, and having to challenge yourself, to having to like check yourself, think about like, what am I doing? Is this is this good long term or not? And I think it's a really healthy place to be. Constantly, I'm failing all the time. It
Yeah,
and
I struggle with the time though. Like going out for a timed run, I don't know how far out to go to make it back in 3 hours, say. Whereas I can easily Google like a 15-mile run, like find out where to go. But I feel like I'd end up running too short or too long pretty regularly. You must.
usually
Well,
go
I
a
guess
little
if
too
it's
long.
too long, yeah.
Well, for my lunch, I'll do a smaller, it's a smaller up and backs or whatever, and just have a time. I mean, it's a loose time that I'm aiming for. This year, I found. I mean, I my daughter's boyfriend bought me for Christmas a weight vest, and I've been snowshoeing with a weight vest on, and then I started running my snowshoe trail that I made. I'm like, oh, this is a lot of fun. Like, it's a completely different kind of, and I'm slow as can be. If I'm going a 16-minute mile pace on the snow, I'm doing well, but
Yeah,
I'm gassed afterwards, and I'm like, oh, this is something different. It breaks up what I'm doing, so that's been a little discovery for me. But
that's a good
but
idea.
I missed well. So if you went back and looked at some of my older videos, which I doubt you did, but I got it 2 years ago. I got it about 2 years ago, just before the pandemic, which is almost 3 years, I guess. I got attacked by a police canine dog on my run in the morning.
I actually did hear about that. Yes.
It was insane. So my wife's been kind of freaked out about me being on the road. So it's like I've been trying to find a way to last year I do a lot of treadmill, which I just despise. Like I just can't. Uh, and so I've been trying to find a way like I can run when it's dark out, but not on the roads, and not that there's a lot of police canines running out or out around there, but and that's been my solution, is running in the snow, which has been kind of nice.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds really, really hard.
Yeah. I'll do the snowshoes until it gets good and packed down, but then once it starts to get crusty, then I just run on that path. Well, I like being in the woods. I find, you know,
Yeah,
but I'm mostly a road runner like you.
yeah. I just can't find the distance on trails, and the trails here where I live are pretty rugged. Like they are definitely, I would consider them hiking trails. I think somebody out west might consider it a nice ultra trail, but for me, it seems really, really rugged.
Yeah. Um. So why do you do all this stuff? I mean, like, or what do you say to people when they ask you, like, why are you doing this?
Do I do it? I mean, for me, it's really a way of life. The daily run. My sister's the same way. I mean, she's like 4 mile a day, like every single day that she's able to do. Actually, she usually does it during the week. She likes to have her weekends off. She can go hiking and skiing and stuff like that. But it really is a way of life. For me as a teacher, we get out of school at 2:30. There's nothing better than going out the door and going for an hour run, come back. I'm so much more focused. I can get a ton of work done. Most everybody's gone from the building at that point, and it really helps me kind of digest my day and then get some really good focused work in when I'm done. But honestly, I mean, I was really race focused in my 20s and 30s. When I turned 40, it became more fun. I think because the whole last man standing thing, going slower. I didn't actually put on any more miles. I just went slower in my miles, trying to be social, doing it, running some relay races with friends. So yeah, it's become more of a fun thing and a little less competitive, which sounds weird, but because I'm still competing and I'm at like a level that I never thought I would be at. But marathoning and ultra running just seem really different mentally for me. And I think part of it is just an appreciation that I can still run too at 46 years old, still be able to go out there and do some pretty incredible and being around some pretty incredible people. I hardly ever run with people, but when I do, I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's one thing that surprised me. I've in my training over the years, everything's been alone. I'm always alone in my head, and I do enjoy that. I do think there's a therapeutic aspect to just being alone in your thoughts. And then even when I've done marathons, I'm usually kind of, you get separated, you're doing your own pace and you're kind of alone. And then Last Man almost changed something in me, because the last time I did Millinocket, I was chatting with everybody. And the race was, until it got bad, it was very enjoyable. Yeah, it's such a cool thing. But I was wondering, I just had a thought, and I was gonna try to Google this. I don't even know if it's available. I wonder how many runners have crossed 200. Like,
Good question. Yeah.
and I'm not talking like rate. I'm talking like in that format, because I do think. Tell me if you agree. I think 100 in a last man standing format is harder than a 100-mile race.
I don't know. I've never done a 100-mile race.
Okay, 200. Right. I think just because you can have a bad hour in a race. You can just walk for an hour and then still finish a race and be a faster, where you just can't have a bad hour, in the last man standing. So I think it's hard, but I wonder how many would you guess, like, total people in the last man standing that have been over 200?
I think I know pretty closely, actually, because I looked at it last fall, and I don't think it's changed since last fall too much. But they actually have an all-time ranking on the Bigs website, and I think I'm still at 50th all-time with 237 miles. So maybe another 50 after that have gone over 200. So I'm gonna say it's less than 100 in that format that have gone over 200.
So I mean, just you're I mean, I don't know what that percentages of the world population is, but it's pretty close to infinitely small.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. And it's not like you're doing it at 23 and 24. You know what I mean? Even though I think there might be some advantage as you get older, maybe. Or I think our bodies, I know what's that?
I said, I think there is with long ones. There's definitely the cumulative miles / experience factor.
And I think there's actually, like, I told my primary care physician at one point that, like, I was surprised that I was doing better at these distance things where I never used to. And he said that, literally a loss of muscle mass can actually be helping that. Yeah.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that.
Who knows? He seems to be right on a lot of other things, but I don't know if he's just speculating there.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. I mean, you're not carrying around. I mean, you lift when you're young, like, you gain bulk really quick. It's much harder.
Right, and you gas, right. And I definitely noticed it, like, swimming wise. Like, if anything, my form in swimming is slightly better. I'm a little less as thick as I used to be. So, like, my stroke is a little smoother, a little bit more graceful, probably. But that top gear just definitely is not there like it used to be.
Right.
Yeah. Do you think, what are your thoughts when somebody says, I can't run, or you're gonna, you're gonna end up blowing out your knees, the kind of common things that, like, people say, why we shouldn't be doing this?
Yeah. I mean, I've done some reading. So I coach running with my middle schoolers, and my goal with them is to get them to run a 5K without walking, and so that even if they don't run for the next 10 years, they'll be like, you know what? When I was 10 or 11 years old, I ran a 5K without walking, and maybe I'll try that again. Like, they already have that, a little bit of that confidence that a lot of us don't have because we didn't try that when we were young. But anyway, like, when you talk about the knees, there have been studies that show that runners actually do better knee-wise than the common person. We're flexing our bones. We're doing some things that actually might turn out to be good that people didn't think were good years ago. So, I mean, there's some people who literally they can't run. I mean, there's legit people who can't for whatever physical reason. But a lot of people, it's right there. And you just got to start really, really small.
I think it's so cool that, like, I mean, I think of the kids you're teaching that are aware of kind of some of your accomplishments. They're grasp of what's possible is so much bigger than you and I had growing up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just remember my parents talking about, like, I wanted to be a professional soccer player. They're like, well, nobody really ever becomes a professional, like statistically, nobody ever makes it there. You should definitely focus on your studies in case that doesn't work out. Um, but yeah, just setting those limits on someone's dreams, like try to give them that hope that it's possible. But yeah, you should still be planning for something else if it doesn't work out.
So what are some of the mental hurdles you've had to kind of overcome in training and in racing? Like I, for, I mean, I think I have a hint of it, but for somebody that doesn't even know what these races are like what's going on in your head during these races? Or are you
No.
just locked in? Like I look at Ed seems to me like when I saw like you couldn't break his concentration is what it seems like. Where other people are more social, and Jason, I felt like I could see some up and downs. Like there's points where he frustrated with himself. I'm just going to run fast now, or or are
Yeah.
we're yeah. What's it like inside your head?
At this point, I've been very fortunate in my progression through backyard specifically, having won my first one and then just keep going longer and longer and longer. It's just built so much confidence. So when I go out there, it's not that I'm confident I'm going to win or anything, but I'm confident I can go X number of miles. And so I don't worry about it until I get to X number of miles. Uh, Honestly, this sounds probably a little cocky at this point to you, but like 100 miles is automatic for me now. Like I know I can do it, so it's the worst part of the race because I'm
And
like, oh my god, like I have to get through this 100 before I start getting tired and have to push the next 100. And that's just happened in the last 2 years, I think, where it feels automatic, and that first 100 isn't as it's not as fun as it used to be to do. But as far as mentally, I honestly I'm trying to divert my own attention by chatting with other people. While I picked up these big Osage apples, like they're softball size things, and I juggled them through the course a little
I
bit, like
saw a
just as
picture of that.
yeah, just stupid things like that. My cousin recommended that to me through Facebook once, like just to do that through a finish line once. So I did that, and so early on, it's all about diversion, having fun. Uh, then eventually, I get serious and try to still pick somebody to run with, but we don't chat as much. We'll just run nearby one another. And then when it gets late in the race, I don't even know. I guess I'm just thinking about the next aid station. Like, what do I need to do? What batteries do I need to change? What do I need to eat? What's the order of things? But having a crew takes a lot of that out. I don't have to stress about it as much. I still have to communicate with them a little bit, but I know they're going to have food. I know they're going to have liquid, so I don't have to think about that part. I mean, my first 3 races, I think I didn't have any crew, and though I think I enjoy running without a crew, running with a crew brings me to totally new levels as far as how far I can actually push myself. Having that crew person's there. Have you had a crew yet for any of these? Any of your big
So
races?
so I did have a crew. My wife was there, and then my mother came and my aunt, and then they left. And my wife came back, and so that I had them there. But if anything, it was interesting. It almost ended. It's part of what ended my day. Um, I had JT and I were running together, and he had backed out. He had finished, and I our goal was kind of 100 at that point. But I was so satisfied with how good I felt, how good everything felt, and I'm looking at them like I'm just making them wait around for me. And so like it actually like, and that was kind of like, let's just call it a day. I'm happy with everything. I couldn't be more. I went into the race partially injured, and kind of had very low expectation. I'm like, I could be 10 miles into this thing and my knee acts up again, and I'm done. and to be 20 yards in, I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not making them stay any longer. And this year, I'm actually don't think I'm going to have a crew at all. My mother
Okay.
might stop by for a little while, but I think you're right to really push limits. You do need that support.
Yeah. So I had a similar experience. The first time I broke 100, I had crew for the second half of it, like 6 a.m. the second day, um, and I felt bad. Like my wife and John, my other crew member, and my kids all went over to the Pinelands Marketplace, whatever it's called, to get some food. And I decided to just call it. Like, I don't want them waiting around all day for me. Like, this is, I met my 100-mile goal. I don't need to be here. I regretted it afterwards. And my wife was actually kind of upset with me too. She's like, I left and then you just quit. So she got a lot of
Similar with my wife. Yes.
yeah. Like all this training, like why not just put it out there, At first she was just worried that all this training and these races actually aren't very healthy for you. And I think she still has that in the back of her mind, but I think she's very supportive now. Like, you're not quitting now. Like, keep going. Like until you're really done. Keep going. So yeah, the crew thing is really helpful. You mentioned something else about injury. Just an interesting thing. My second last man standing, 2017, I was injured for 10 months leading up to that race. So I had no training at all. And I went there, I did 21 miles, so my longest run of the year. And within a month, I was racing a marathon. Whatever that pace, the run slash walk thing, my injury actually ended on that day. Pretty wild. And then in 2000, I don't know, 19 maybe, I went in injured too. I ran with one of my former students. We were going too fast, and I tweaked something in my backside, and I was really worried going in there. And it hurt for the first 2 loops, and then it was great the whole rest of the way. And the injury never came back. So last man standing backyard ultras can actually be very therapeutic.
It fixes things.
Right.
Well, it definitely seemed to help my knee. Yeah, I have this little. My son, luckily, is a physical therapist, so I have a PT on call, and it's an overuse kind of like little tendon thing that just doing the stupid miles I did last year, just literally focusing on that. But it's interesting something you said. When I was doing Ironman, I remember reading something saying that the greatest predictor of success in Ironman is past experience. And I had done the first time I did an Ironman distance, and then I did it again the next year. I dropped almost a full hour of time off my year before. I wasn't in that much better shape. I didn't do it. It almost seems impossible to me that I was. I don't know where all the time got made up in. I mean, some of it was stomach distress at the end, whatever, but most of it was just experience and kind of knowing, yeah, I can handle this. I know what it feels to finish the bike, and like now I have to start a marathon. Like I know, and I know I can get through it, even if it's really bad. Like just having that confidence
Yeah.
was that hour gain that I made, most of it. So, and I think you're absolutely right with last man standing, stuff like that. I don't think it's arrogant or anything at all. Like 100 is in your bag. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about 50. For me, it's like 50 feels like I got to get through that, and then not even that. It's actually the next morning. I feel like I can get to the next morning, and then it's like, okay, now I got to see what happens. Which I got to say was such a cool. I'm always amazed at our brains and our way our brains try to trick us into stopping or whatever. But like, I was struggling. I wasn't feeling good, and I turned to JT. I go, "Is that the sun coming up?" He's like, "Yep." And it was just like that. All of a sudden, I'm happy, feel great. Nothing's bothering me. Like, there's no physical thing that changed in my body. Maybe some chemistry in my brain a little bit, but it it just takes a little bit of a change of perspective, which is what a great life lesson in general, right?
Right. Yeah, Pineland Farms is gorgeous in the morning. Holy cow. I mean, just the greenery on the ground and like just some fine mosses or whatever it is that grows out there. It's gorgeous. I always sing Cat Stevens' "Morning Is Broken," like the first morning when when the sun rises, because it's just so rejuvenating. I mean, I am not a night person at all, and it's tough to get through the night, and that daylight brings such a big boost. It's pretty cool.
It's not ready for the condensation. I don't know. Is it like that every year?
Yeah. So I've done Last Man Standing 7 times, and the weather's been the same every single year, except one
Hoping
year it rained on 2 people, the last 2 guys. But every year it's like 72, maybe 75, and the nights get dewy, and you definitely get wet. It used to be over on the other side of the road. Last Man Standing was the first couple of years, and it's a lot more grass over there. So I definitely remember those vividly. But there's a lot to do. I actually bring a tarp and I cover all my shoes and stuff while I'm out running, and then pull it off when I come back into the aid station.
Yeah, I had a tent, and JT and I were side by side. So I had a tent and he had like a pop-up little tent thing, and everything on his side, which we both had stuff over there, got soaked, and we had to just move it all inside the tent just to get, we weren't ready for that. I've debated on, and I'm still not sure if I'm going to do it. I have like a recumbent bike, and I've debated on sitting and kind of like pedaling while I'm on the rest, not in any kind of exercise, but just to keep the blood flowing. I'm so worried about my legs tightening up in between. Like, if I could avoid that discomfort, it'd be like, man, this race would be so much more pleasurable. But it could be hydration, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're going to do it this year?
I don't know. I haven't decided.
Or, I mean, coming to Last Man.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't see, honestly, I don't see, this is my forever race. As long as I can keep doing it. I don't see any reason why I wouldn't. Like, I've done marathons, Ironman, lots of different levels of triathlon. I've never experienced something I enjoyed as much as that format. It's such a different level that I don't see why I won't be doing this every year from now on.
Just hooked on it. It doesn't even matter if it's a down year or if it's a year that I'm in great shape. I think I'm still going to go back. Just it's my people that are there, like, and the format is awesome too. So I mean, I love the directors. They do such a good job. It's like team of 4, and I just really enjoy hanging out with them, even if I'm not still racing.
Do you think the direction so Jason told me he believes the direction we're about to go is the harder of the two. He said less people have gone over 100 going that direction than the other. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. People definitely, there's a lot of people who have their opinion on that. And I don't have one. I actually enjoy the opportunity to climb up Gloucester Hill by walking rather than running. But then when you get to the top of that, it's still a gradual uphill for quite a while after that. And I don't know what I'm going to do this year, but in the past, once I get to the top of Gloucester Hill, I run again because I love that little gradual uphill. Works really well for me. It's probably harder going that way. Depends. I mean, if your quads are the issue, that's probably going to be the easier way to go is to go up those hills rather than having to come down them. But so I've run that had 5 years on that side of the road, and then 2 years on the other side. The other side is definitely harder than the Oak Hill side, which is what we're running now. I think I did the 24-hour race over there a couple of years ago, and I had forgotten how much harder that side is of the road. So anyway, I don't as far as the clockwise versus counterclockwise, I don't have much of an opinion on it. I like the variety. I've suggested to Will that they alternate every other loop, where they just cross the finish line to be the start line each time.
Right.
I think that could bump people's mileage up a bit, break up the monotony a little bit. But the monotony is part of the race.
I think this year I think is going to be pretty interesting because I mean, I sounds like you're going for it. Ed's, as far as I know, still going for it. Jason's definitely feels like he's getting to a new level. Chase, or last year he was just going for 100. He's like, this year I'm gonna go see what I really can do. Um, yeah, it should be interesting. I don't. JT has some confidence, but he has confidence issues, so I won't bring up. You cracked me up. Um,
Eric is coming back too. The guy who finished second last year, he said he's coming back. Ryan Mativier is planning on going all out. So it should be a really good race. And there's always going to be 2 or 3 other people that nobody know about
right.
that are going to come. I mean, there's people from all over the place coming to this race. There's a ton from California and Texas and New York. Like, I don't know who any of those people are, but or why they're coming to Maine.
Right, right. And I'm yeah, I'm with you on the whole goals thing, and I think it has to be. I don't know how you could do it without some kind of goals. I really don't. You know, 100, but I have like my tiered goals. I think is kind of where I've kind of gotten. It's like 100 for sure, but I don't, barring some kind of injury, I don't see why 100 doesn't happen. And then it's like I'd like to get to the next evening and then see what happens. I don't know how. The probably the biggest mental thing that I haven't, how to deal with that lack of sleep, you know, that deep into it and experience with it. I know from having children and when they were young, how inadequate I am compared to my wife with lack of sleep. And um yeah, so that'll be that's where I'm hoping to be. You know, I'd like to see the sun kind of go down that next evening. Who knows
Yeah.
if that's even possible, but I'd love to be there.
So I've done that just once, and it's tougher the second night. I mean, I only made it an hour in, I think, and I was like, oh my god, thank goodness this race is over. Ed had dropped out. All I had to do was complete a loop, and but the second night is it's a different experience. But if you're struggling sleeping, it's a lot easier the second night than it is the first.
Yeah, and then there's the whole, as you're starting to look at starting to go further, like if you're starting to look into going to the second night, okay, now I have to spend the time to charge things or have enough things to be charged. And like, you know, you had the light issues, having backups and what do I need, what don't I need? It's such a cool, the logistics of the whole thing, you know, and then there's so much still to learn. Like I had brought just a last minute thing. We had this, like, my daughter had like kind of like a dorm room plastic drawer thing, you know, and I just grabbed that last minute. I'm like, oh, I'll put my night stuff here, and I'd separate out things. Well, with the moisture, I kept the moisture out. I had things nice and organized. GT's like, that's brilliant. You know, I'm like, oh, it's just a last minute thing, and I picked up, you know, lots of little things. And I I heard I was listening to a podcast. It was talking about, I think it was Andrew Huberman was talking about how the anticipation is always like the most endorphins your body gets is just before you eat that thing that you want to eat, just before you do the thing. Like that's when you get the greatest hit. And I think there's some, like, I love the build up to the race and getting ready for it. And then, but this is such a different race because it's a slow burn and there's so much, like the first, I'm looking forward to that first marathon distance while there's lots of people around. Where before I was like, I don't want to be in the crowd. Like last year, that was my thought. Now it's like, I want to be in there. You know, it's, yeah.
How was your tent set up compared to the folks that were around you as far as how much stuff you had for this race?
Honestly, though, I was so locked in, I didn't pay a lot of attention to other people around me that much. I get reports afterwards from my wife would tell me, like, this person's doing that. We had, yeah, I think I actually, like, I think probably because I practiced it a little bit. I think I was prepared for different scenarios, so I wasn't overly prepared. I do think this year, one thing I'm doing, so whether or not I have any support showing up, I plan to spend the next night in the tent there. the second night. I'm going to sleep there no matter what. So
Yeah.
that isn't a thing. Like I'm not driving anywhere. I don't have to think about that. Like wherever I end, I know where it's going to go. So one more lap's not going to change that. So I think that's, one way I'm hoping to address that thought.
Right. That's a good idea. Yep.
Yeah. And I don't think they'll have any problem me sleeping there.
Yeah. I mean, every time I go to one of these races, I learn something new gear wise. I mean, some people have crazy amounts of stuff, and I have easily quadruple what I had when I first started doing this.
And
So
any gear tips, any kind of like anything that you like, whatever you picked up along the way that you think is maybe invaluable or.
yeah, so two things come to mind. One is the zero gravity chair as far as sleep goes. I mean, I don't know why I sleep so well on that thing. It's not that comfortable, really. I think it's just the Z shape, maybe, of it that makes it comfortable. And then these handhelds, when I first started doing Last Man Standing, I just carried one of those tiny little Poland Spring bottles in my hand. And then year four, I found two of these on the trail. Somebody just ditched them. I was running by them. I could see them because they're reflective. I could see them in my headlamp. I'm like, oh man, somebody's gonna come get this, right? And after like 5 hours, I picked them up and claimed them as my own, and I've had them ever since. And I just the volume that I'm able to drink, and it's not as hard to hold as just a bottle.
You
That's what's
like running with something in your hand though? I can't
I don't
imagine
love
that.
it. I don't love it, but it's better than not drinking. And then last winter, I couldn't do Millinocket, so I ended up doing a marathon here at home, and I carried those. It's a different thing in the winter. I would not recommend it at all in the winter because my hands were frozen carrying those things the whole time. So I don't love them, but I don't have anything else really to carry my water. It makes it a little bit easier. So that's why I use it. I've never tried one of the backpacks.
I
I don't
I
even
got
know.
I got a vest this year that had my drink sits here and I had a little straw that sticks up, so it's right there at my mouth. It's quick and easy to that seemed to work pretty well. And I do run with I have like a stretchy belt that I can kind of put like a smaller water bottle in,
Okay.
which seems to work well. But
Yeah,
I
those backpacks are great for like really like a point to point or a really long loop. Whereas Last Man Standing, where you can come back every time and carry glasses of water.
I found that for me toe socks, which I'd never had before, but I'd always get my toenail would rub against the other toe, and that's where I get chafing if I was going to get chafing. And just having toe socks definitely just eliminated that as a thing, which was nice.
So Ed Clifford actually tipped me off to toe socks. I'd never heard of them before. I mean, I actually have heard of them because they were like a gag gift in the '80s, like these big fluffy toe socks. But I never thought about running with them. But Ed ran the last loop of a 24-hour with me, and we were just chatting about Last Man Standing. I'm like, oh man, the blisters are killing me. Like I always have blisters. He's like, do you wear toe socks? I'm like, no. What's that about? So for the last 2 years, I've been wearing toe socks, and I have two different thicknesses. I think the thinner ones work better for me, and then they also go up high. They go up over my calf. I'm always kicking myself in the calf. It's really nice to have long socks and toe socks all in one, and it's helped a lot. I still get blisters, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be, and I'm running a lot further before I get them. Yeah, the whole toenail thing. I heard you mention that. I did anchor down. What was that? It was a 24-hour race, and I lost 5 toenails from that. So I actually went to Biggs with just 5 toenails, which was actually lovely
Right.
because I had no toenail issues.
I've had that thought. Like these things just are in the way.
Yeah, I have a friend who actually had had him removed. Like he's a big hiker. He's had his toenails removed.
Didn't know that was even
Yeah.
obviously it's a possibility.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. So you run in trail shoes? Or
Typically no. I'm a
okay.
road runner. I've had I've had trail shoes like the Cascadias in the past. It's been years since I've used those. I've been using the Hoka Challenger ATR 6, which is a crossover, I guess. It's partially trail, partially road. I've liked those, but I've been going with the Ultras lately. Just road, wide toe box. Doesn't. I just my feet blow up during races. They get bigger, they get wider. It just feels uncomfortable. And the Ultras have worked really, really well, even on trails. I'm not doing anything super technical.
Right.
So road shoes work fine.
Yeah, I really wasn't sure. JT and I both went with road shoes at Last Man Standing. We're both going into it wondering, is this a mistake? And looking around at most people are wearing kind of more trail thing. I didn't regret it at all. You know, I mean, my Atreus that I run in literally are flat on the bottom. There's no grip whatsoever. If it got moist, if it did rain, then it could be a problem. I might have to switch. Have you ever ran on those trails when they're wet?
Yeah, it's quite slick. I think it's like a clay
Yeah.
that's on the ground. You definitely slip. I've run the trail festival in the spring. That's often wet, and you definitely have steps where you're spinning out. And
Yeah.
I hate doing that because you lose all that momentum.
Right. So but I just figure for me when I run trail shoes, they just seem so much heavier than the road ones that I run in, and I like that many steps over that long of time. I figure lighter weight makes a difference at some point. So
I just hate the nubs. Like I always kick myself in the calf, and those nubs on there really wear you down quick.
I've never noticed kicking myself, but I have my running on the snow. I have some of those yak tracks that I put on my shoes to run, and they every once in a while it gets caught on my pant leg or something like that. So I didn't realize I was doing it, but maybe I'm starting to pick up a kick in the calf here and there.
That when I'm tired. Whenever I'm tired, my left heel kicks my right calf. Happens all the time.
Yeah. Well, Jason, thank you so much for doing this with me. I really do appreciate it. You're, I don't know, it's so impressive what you've been able to accomplish, and it's great that you've kind of paved the path for a lot of us. What's possible. So thank you.
Thanks for having me on. It's always nice to talk about something I love so much. I don't do it all that often, believe it or not. So it's really nice to chat with somebody with a similar mind.
Yeah. I mean, you can. There's lots of people where I start the conversation, I see their eyes roll, or whatever. It's like, okay, and running isn't exactly for non-runners the most interesting of topics, but I love it. I love to hate it. I don't really. It's I don't know. I have this weird. The friend at the pool asked me, oh no, my my primary care asked me, he's like, so because he's like, so are you doing any Ironmans? And I'm like, no, I'm pretty much just mostly running. He goes, so running's your favorite? I'm like, no, running's my least favorite by far. And it kind of gave me a look, and I'm like, well, but it's something about doing the difficult thing. And I'm like, I love how I feel afterwards. I love what it does for me physically. I mean, I definitely see a lot of benefits in it, and yeah, and cycling seems so dangerous to me. Every time I'm out there and a car goes by, I feel like it's just a matter of time before somebody takes me out. And
Yeah.
swimming, honestly, kind of a similar thing. If I'm swimming, the pool's only available to me so many hours, and if I'm swimming in a lake, sooner or later one of these boats going by is going to get me. So yeah, I have on my list to do a double Ironman. That's like one of my I really want to try to do. But logistically, the cycling will take the full daylight hours. So I'd have to start swimming in the dark. I'd have to do the full swim in the dark. So
you start in the swim in the dark, and then
I would have to because you can't bike when it's dark.
Okay.
So I'd have to start like 2 hours before sunrise, just to be able to finish the cycling at time to start the run. Yeah, I haven't figured out the logistics to do that. What's that?
Is that a solo endeavor or is that a race?
The only Ironman I've done have been solo. Both have been solo. My parents have a place in Damascotta, so I swim in Damascotta, and then I bike to the Bangor area and around till I complete it, and then run a marathon right locally. So my wife, I had done like a half Ironman in Old Orchard, and it's like $300-400 to get into the race, and then hotel stay and everything. She's like, I'll just put this on for you for free. I'm like, I'll take you up. So that's kind of how that came about. And then like, this is a way better way to do it. It's a lot less expensive. This is a nice thing of, go ahead.
Sorry. I did a half Ironman many years ago, maybe around 2000 or something. And I'm pretty sure it was under $100, but it was a long time ago.
You do Pumpkin Man?
No, I did.
Because that
what was
one's
it called? It was at Lake Winnipesaukee. They don't do it anymore. Timberman? Maybe Timberman.
yeah. But you're in Berwick, is that what you said?
Right now I'm in South Bristol. I'm just below
Okay.
your parents.
oh geez, you are.
Yeah.
Did you mention Berwick?
Berwick is where I grew up. Yes.
Okay. So Pumpkin Man, I think, is in South Berwick.
Yeah, it is. I've heard of it. I've never done it though.
Yeah, that was an interesting race because they have there's like a little ski slope right after the lake, and they have so you swim the lake, and then you have to go up the ski slope to the transition, and then you start the cycle, and then you do the run. But they have kind of a breakout in the competition. Whoever can go up the hill the fastest gets a separate prize. And I went for it, and I ended up winning it. Nice. And I speaking to what you've mentioned, I threw up all over the place at the top of the hill. It's like, this was a major mistake. But you're just south of my parents. I love that area. Yeah, they're actually in Jefferson, the north side of the lake.
Okay.
But I've done the loop around the lake is almost a marathon. So like it's a very hilly kind of marathon, but that's I love that area. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good area to live in, and it's a lot hillier than Southern Maine. I definitely get my hill workouts every day without even meaning to.
As long as you don't have to get through Wiscasset at certain times of the day, it's a great area.
Yeah. Yep. We try to go the opposite direction. It's actually nice living here because my family's down in New Hampshire, and so we're always traveling the opposite direction that the traffic is.
Right.
So that's pretty lovely.
Well, thanks again, Jason. I look forward to competing against you and talking to you at the race, and stay in touch.
Yeah, thanks so much for your headlamp and for doing this.
And anytime. Yeah, maybe next year I'll need yours.
Right.
Right. Thank you, Jason.
All right. Bye, Ben.